Yes. So we are in the Jnana Sankhya section. That goes up to verse 30. And after that, Krishna will talk about other aspects. And the reason it's known as contents of Gita summarized, because you should understand, it talks about all the aspects that Krishna is going to elaborate upon later on in the Bhagavad Gita. And then, so this is just what we did in the the first chapter, that Arjun had his doubt was compassion, enjoyment, fear of sinful reactions, destruction of family traditions, and the first, fifth, and Krishna systematically refutes all of them. That's how we are connected. So we talked about Arjun's indecision, and then we talked about two important verses there where Krishna is just trying to give Arjun a pep talk, and he calls him Anarya. Anarya means who's not spiritually advanced, and he called him Klebyam, important, Hridaya-daurbalyam. And then we talked about details of Hridaya-daurbalyam. What is Hridaya-daurbalyam? Where does it fit in the big corpus of anarthas that are sitting in my heart? So where does Hridaya-daurbalyam come in? And how that's the most powerful one. That is why Prabhupada repeats about Hridaya-daurbalyam in this chapter, in the 15th chapter, 17th chapter. Prabhupada will keep on talking about. Then we come to the Sankhya Yoga, Jnana Yoga, also known as, which is starting from verse 11 and goes all the way up to verse 30. Okay, and this is a refutation to the Arjun's first argument of compassion. We will talk about matter and spirit, how to differentiate between them, what are the characteristics of the soul, and how, after knowing all this, one should remain titikshava. He should remain titikshava. So this is what I mentioned to you. This is for a knowledge that Sankhya Yoga is of two types. One, as we will read in, or you might have already read, in Kapila Dev in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3. Kapila Muni talks about it. That teaches us how to become detached from matter, search out Krishna within our heart. And more recently, an atheist Kapila, he propounded another theory, Sankhya philosophy, where he's just talking about analyzing the material elements, nothing beyond that. So we only follow what Kapila Dev in Srimad Bhagavatam has given us. And then we talked in detail about Titikshava, right? We talked about Titikshava. What is tolerance, right? Tolerance was what we talked about in detail, because Krishna mentions about it quite frequently in this chapter, and he keeps on talking about it. This will be an ongoing theme throughout Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna will keep on talking about tolerance. Sitoshna sukha dukheshu samasanga. He will keep on bringing that again and again. The reason why he is telling us to do that, because only when we are tolerant will we be able to advance in bhakti. Otherwise, we will keep on getting fixated into minor things, right? As I mentioned last time, tolerance means to keep small things small so that you can focus on the big ticket items in your life, right? And this concept of tolerance, that's the purpose of it being in our lives. If we don't have that, we will be wasting and fretting away about all sorts of minor details, and we'll be wasting all our energy. And as it said, energy flows wherever attention goes. So when we put attention to small ticket items, we're not able to tolerate them, all our energy gets sucked into them. But if you're able to, discriminate, then we are able to move beyond. So that's the can everyone please mute themselves. I keep on getting this echo. Okay, yeah. So, and we talked about how the Pandavas, they demonstrated the perfect position of being tolerant. Initially, when the Kauravas, they burned down their house, they poisoned Bhim, and they tolerated that.
90%.
They did tolerated all that. But then when their wife was, they attempt to disrobe her, then they didn't tolerate that situation. They didn't walk away from it. They changed that situation. And last but not the least, when they came to know that Lord Krishna has left the planet Earth, then they just walked away from the situation. And I mentioned to you, walking away is very different from running away. We check our immediate impulsive reaction, and then with intelligence, we decide what to do. Okay. Yes. So that was what we meant. So have tolerance to endure the presence of something without succumbing to its influence. So that was the important part. And we also talked about having the concept of guru. Why guru is needed. I told you the story of the kid who wanted to be a martial arts expert, but he didn't have a left hand. But then his teacher was able to use his disadvantage to his advantage, and because of that reason, the child was able to win against any strong contender. So that's the quality of a teacher, that he or she can convert our disadvantages, our drawbacks into our advantages. We talked about how the hippies, what Prabhupada did with hippies. Okay, so now moving forward, I just want to put this section out here, just because what happens across Bhagavad Gita, this will be a common theme you'll see. You might suddenly think that where did this come from? Why did Krishna talk about this? Why is Krishna talking about this particular thing? Where did this question? Well, why? You will see that there is such a significant difference between verses that might leave us lost. That what's the purpose here? Why did Krishna speak that? So for that purpose, I just wanted to highlight this, and I'll highlight this as we move in other chapters. That it's not always that Krishna answers what Arjuna is literally asking. Many a times, Krishna can understand what Arjuna is thinking in his mind, right? I just, for example, I put here that in 2:13, right? Dehi nosmin yatha dehe komaram yovanam jara. So Arjuna doesn't ask it specifically, but Krishna said that it could possibly be that Arjuna might think that the change of body is still a cause of lamentation. And that's the reason Krishna brings out the verse. Dehi nosmin yatha dehe komaram yovanam jara. Your body is always changing. You don't lament when you go from a child to a youth, from a youth to an adult. You don't lament about that, right? And so on and so forth. And then, like for example, there's a verse where, and we'll go through it, but that where Krishna even talks from an atheist perspective, says that okay, for a minute, if Arjuna may argue that there is no soul and this body is all in all, then even then we don't have to lament for it. So the reason I just wanted to bring these out was to give you an understanding that there is no disconnect in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna never does that. The reason I don't see the connection is because of this reason, that Arjuna might be thinking something and Krishna knows that, and Krishna answers it accordingly. So we have to understand the thought process of Arjuna, and so we can understand the connection and the flow of Bhagavad Gita as it moves forward. Okay. So that's the reason why you'll notice this across the scripture. I just want to bring this out for you. I won't go through all of them. You can read it at your leisure. You have the slides. Okay. So what's the next slide? Okay, this is later on. I'll probably come to this later. Let's go back to the verses. So we did 14th and 14th. Yeah. So we completed 14th, right? So let me just quickly see this. What was all talked about? 2 different names to Arjun, a great heritage. Prabhupada talks about that. Yes, Prabhupada gives examples of tolerance, that people take bath early on in the morning. In India, in the month of March, January, February, people take that. They tolerate the cold. Then ladies, women, they cook in India despite the heat. Nowadays, in the cities, it's comparatively easier. You have air-conditioned houses, etc. But in the villages, still, they don't have that facility. And women still cook in that hot summer. They even cook under, they don't even might have a proper gas stove. They still cook because they're tolerating, because they see a higher purpose. They see that sense of service. Similarly, a person taking a bath early in the morning, he or she sees the purpose that they have to serve the Lord. For that, they have to clean themselves. So they don't let those small ticket items, or the water is cold or it's too hot. They don't let be distracted in that. Right. So in a broader sense, so to be successful in bhakti, we have to go through 3 tests. Okay, there are 3 tests that we have to go through, which is being brought forth by Krishna. One is, there are three types of realizations. Okay, 3 levels, actually, not types, 3 levels of realization. First is flesh versus spirit, right? So I have these carnal desires, right? But then, because I want to become a spiritual person, I let go of those carnal desires. Not completely, I'm not there yet, but whatever I can, right? Well, like, for example, we talked about getting up early in the day. Right? But then I realized that every morning that my pillow and my bed, they have a strong magnetic pull, right? But then, as they say, a warm bed is a cold grave for spirituality. So a warm bed is a cold grave for spirituality. Right? And this is talked through across scriptures. In the Bible, Matthew, one of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ, he also says that it's a similar thing, that spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And that's the problem that I face on a basis. That my flesh is weak, my spirit is willing, I have desires to grow in spiritual life, but my flesh, my body is weak. And we have to always go through these realizations, these tests, and we have to, at every step, to the best of our capacity, overcome them. Right? Then comes, second test comes is, a level is appearance versus reality. Okay. So once we have progressed a bit, we talked about the initial stages of bhakti, right? Anybody remembers from Nectar of Instruction, what were the first stages of bhakti? The first 3, if you can tell me, some of people know.
Prabhu, Shraddha, Sadhusanga, Bhajana Kriya.
Yes, thank you. And now can somebody tell me the 4th one? Not you, Mati, somebody else can tell me the 4th one. So Mati said Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya. What's the 4th one? And I mentioned it's the most important one. No one remembers? Okay. It's, sorry, yes, please say. Somebody was saying something, I didn't hear that. Can you repeat that, please? No.
Utsahan, Prabhuji. Utsahan, Dhairyat, Utsahan, Nishayat, Dhairyat.
No, those were from the second, 3rd verse, actually. So we talked about Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya. The 4th one was Anartha Nivritti, which is the most important, and for many it's very, very long. Anartha Nivritti means is letting go of the anartha. I showed you on that slide the anarthas that we have in our heart, weakness of heart, Hridaya Daurbalyam, and the others, Brahma, and so on and so forth. So when we have progressed a bit, let's say we have come from Shraddha to Sadhu Sangha, we're doing Bhajan Kriya. Bhajan Kriya is somewhat, you can say it's equivalent to getting initiation. We have moved through those stages, okay? And so then we have progressed a bit. So now we might not have these very gross problems that we are going through of flesh and spirit. Is my volume okay for everybody? Can everybody hear me fine?
Prabhu, it's a little muffled. Like I didn't hear what was the first level. I mean, it's like in and out. I'm not sure if it's mine or yours. I don't know about others.
How about others?
It's fine on my end, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Because I have the volume all the way up, but it's. Do you have
No,
the?
Prabhuji, it keeps on going in and out at times
Yeah.
for some reason.
Do you have the fan on, Prabhu?
So no, I don't have the fan on, and I'm not also having. I don't have my headphones either. I could try with my headphones if that makes any difference.
Yeah, I didn't hear it clear the first level. I was going to ask you to repeat it because.
Okay, so I'll try to be closer to the laptop and see if that helps. So,
yeah, you're speaking now. I can hear everything clearly, Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll come closer to the laptop. Probably I was just relaxing like that. So the first one I said was flesh versus spirit. Okay, and then so what I mean by flesh is carnal pleasures of the body. I like to sleep late, right? And I said that a warm bed is a cold grave for spirituality. So we have to try to get over that. So that's the first level of realization that comes. And, that's kind of a test that we have to go through. Once we can overcome some of these, gross realizations, okay, yeah, fine, I can wake up early now. That's okay. Then we come to a next level, which is appearance versus reality, right? So when we have moved forward in our process, the test becomes on a mental level, right? For example, many a times I would try to show off. Oh, I have knowledge. I can memorize, so on and so forth. So externally, I may seem detached, but internally, there is a whirlpool of emotions that I'm going through. Pride, desires, all that is there. So it's appearance versus reality. Outwardly, my appearance is fine, but the reality inside is very different. So I've been able to overcome some of the very simple ones, desires, sleeping, eating might be, but then when I moved forward, the other desires come into picture. And you all must have observed it moving through your process of bhakti, that's the second level of channel, right? And the third and the toughest one is where I start saying it becomes me, that I am doing something, I'm the doer. And I don't give Krishna the credit for it. That's the worst trap that comes into any bhakta's life, any devotee's life. Prabhupada even mentions that a devotee crosses every single barrier, and he's moving through. But then the last trap of Maya is to tell that the person that now you are God. That's the last way the Maya fools you. So you think that it's me doing everything. These people are following me. This is mine. That's another level of battle, a completely another level of battle. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because Krishna is starting with the very essence of all these concepts, of all these three realizations that I mentioned. He's talking about the soul, right? Prabhupada repeatedly stressed in his classes that you're not an American, you're not an Indian, you're a soul, right? Similarly, what Krishna is doing here is he's trying to tell us you're not a body, you're not the soul. Get over the flesh and spirit, flesh versus spirit desires, appearance versus reality desires, your glory versus my glory desires. That's what's Krishna. And that's why he's starting right at the essence of the whole principle, the whole philosophy, that you're not this body, you're a soul. Even if we could theoretically get this in our mind, that I'm not this body, I'm a soul, things will start progressing for me significantly. I don't have to realize it, not I want to realize it, but the anarthas in my heart are so much that I'm not able to realize it at this moment. But then, even if I'm theoretically able to conceive that, okay, I'm not this body, I'm a soul, then slowly with that, the concomitant practice of investigation or introspection helps me realize this phenomenon, that I am not this body, I'm a soul, right? So these three levels is what we should, be always careful of, aware of. I'm not mentioning this to scare anybody of you, but we have to know where we stand in the bhakti process, right? Bhakti is not a theoretical process. It's not fanaticism. It's realistic, it's practical, it's scientific. We read in the first verse of the Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada says this is the theistic science. And the reason it's the theistic science, because you can do an experiment, you can get results out of it. Experiments, results. You chant properly, you'll see your heart purifying. Your anathas will start going away, right? And when you start, introspecting, you will realize that, my God, my heart is full of so much envy and pride. What am I trying to, find faults in others? Let me fix myself. That happens over the period. And that all begins with when we realize what these levels are, and that I'm not a body, I'm a soul. So that's just the essence of what Prabhupada is doing, what Krishna is doing across the Bhagavad.
Prabhuji, can you please repeat the 3 levels again? Pleasure versus?
So flesh versus spirit, that's the first one.
Okay.
Is my voice still breaking, or is it better than that?
It's better, Prabhuji. Flesh versus spirit, appearance versus reality, and?
My glory versus God's glory.
Got it.
Right? So when Krishna gives us fame in bhakti, and I assure you, Krishna will give you tons of fame in bhakti. All you have to do is just be a little bit of austere, a little bit of service for Krishna, because Krishna is very, magnificent. He's just ready to give it out. Like Mahaprabhu, he was giving out that Mahamantra and love to everybody, irrespective of where that person comes from. So similarly, Krishna is very loving. He will give you fame and bhakti. But then what will happen is that Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ concept will come in the being. I am the doer. Okay? And that's another level of battle, which many senior devotees face. Right? So by acknowledging our drawbacks, by understanding where I stand in bhakti, I'm able to move forward. Okay. So now come to the 15th verse. Again, Krishna brings out tolerance. O best among men, Arjun, the person who is not disturbed by happiness or distress, and is steady in both, is certainly eligible for liberation. Right? So now, what is the outcome of tolerance? Krishna is mentioning that. Right? So practicing spiritual life, what is the fruit? Right? Someone might challenge us, why to tolerate? You might be explaining somebody about tolerance, and they might come back and say, oh, why should I tolerate? Right? So result of tolerance is saha amritatvaya kalpate. That, where is that? Oh, yeah, right. So amritatvaya kalpate. That is the that's the fruit of the spiritual of the tolerance that you'll be doing. So this is an amazing offer that Krishna is putting forth. That if you tolerate according to what I'm teaching you, then you will you'll have no more misery. Right? So that's the essence of this book. Prabhupada starts this purport by talking about determination. Right? So person who is determined for advanced stage of spiritual realization and can equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. You all must have heard that story, and I heard that recently also, that how in Akbar's court, and it might be different people acknowledge it to different sources. But if Akbar once in Akbar's court, somebody came and challenged Akbar that, give me one sentence by which the happy can become sad and the sad can become happy. And Akbar went to Birbal, and Birbal came up with the statement that this shall pass, this thou shall pass, right? That this will also pass. Whatever situation you are in, it's going to pass. If you're very happy, it's going to pass. Tomorrow you'll become sad. If you're sad today, tomorrow you'll be happy. There is nothing permanent. There is nothing to stick to. It's going to go away. We hear this across all the scriptures. Srimad Bhagavatam, Narad Muni tells this to Yudhishthir Maharaj, if I remember correctly, the 4th canto, right? That in this material creation, you should not strive for happiness or sorrows, or happiness. So, because what he's saying is that happiness and sorrow come by themselves, because we are destined for that. My karma is going to bring happiness and sorrow accordingly. But what you should strive for, that one cannot even get by traversing through the entire 14 planetary system. That is bhakti. You should strive for that, spiritual realization. So this is again a point to contemplate, that happiness and distress is going to come to me no matter what. So what you should strive for is not a stormless sea. We talked about this analogy in Nectar of Instruction. Don't look for a stormless sea. Look for or work towards an unsinkable ship. Storms are going to come and go. That's the nature of this material world. Every frustration you have is meant to realize us that this place is not meant for me. I'm supposed to get out of it. If I get that concept in my mind, anything that hits me hard, I will see that as something that has been sent to me so that I can move up the spiritual ladder. That's all. There's no other reason why we are hit by these storms on a daily basis. That's what Prabhupada is highlighting. And that's what gives us determination. That my ship is going to be in a stormy ocean. It's never going to move out of it. But I can surely make my ship so strong that it never sinks. And we do that by making the spiritual master the Karnadharam. Last time I referred to a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, that Guru Karnadharam. He becomes your captain of the ship. He or she becomes the captain of the ship. And once he or she becomes the captain of your ship, then if you follow the instructions, the ship will become stronger and stronger and will never sink. That's the essence of this chapter. Oh, sorry, the verse 15. So, but then when I say that, happiness and distress is going to come to us, it doesn't mean that we become inert or we become emotionless, right? We should have spiritual emotions. For example, Hanuman, he went and burned Ravan's Lanka because he was angry, but he used his anger in a proper place. Right? Our emotions are expressed in relationship to Krishna. Right? You can be materially inert and spiritually alert, if I were to put it that way. So, but then, I'm not sure if I brought this up earlier, but in this world, there are two ways of living. Vyavaharika and Paramarthika. Vyavaharika means that I've got a body and I've got to contend with it. I have to live through with this body. I've got a bad bargain, I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to live through it. I have relationships. I have friends, mother, father, daughter, sister. We have relationships. We cannot be inert to them. But then I can be alert to them and understand what those relationships mean to me. And what does that person's relationship means to me? One thing that I heard many years ago and stuck with me was that we never have a direct relationship with any living entity. We always have a triangulated relationship. What that means is that I have a relationship with Krishna, that person also has a relationship with Krishna, and that's how I have a relationship with somebody. That's the way to look at it. So doesn't mean we don't have spiritual emotions. We just have to give them doesn't mean we don't have any emotions, we just have to give it a flavor of spirituality. That's all. So, okay, 16th verse. Now, so it's a mystical shloka here. I highlighted those two verses. So Krishna using the same words. Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sata. So nasata means na asata. Asata means non-existent. So, and similarly sata means eternal. Right? So, and then bhava is endurance, and na bhava is non-endurance. Where is the non-bhava? Bhava, changing quality. Yes. So it's endurance versus changing quality. So it's a kind of a mystical verse, right? So we have seen that how Arjun, there was a call for Arjun to fight, and he refused it. He gives his fifth reason in the beginning, and then he refuses to fight. And then beyond that, we have been reading about Sankhya, that how soul is indestructible, so fight. So this is the counter to Arjun's argument that if I fight, then my relatives will be killed. Krishna says, don't live in ignorance. Don't live in an ignorant body conception, but live in an enlightened spiritual conception. So Krishna is asking Arjun again and again to tolerate. So he's saying, those who are seers of truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the soul, there is no change. This is, they have concluded by studying the nature of both. Right? So that's the 16th verse. Yes, so that's the nature of both. Right. So we understand these two natures, that there are two natures, material and spiritual. Asat is temporary, doesn't exist for a long time. Asato, right? Eternal, for the eternal, there is no cessation. That's what Krishna is mentioning here, right? The eternal, there is no change. It doesn't cease to exist. It doesn't change. It always is there. So Krishna is specifically referring to body and soul. So something that is non-existent or that is kind of temporary versus that is eternal, right? And how is this body non-existent? Like for example, we can see ourselves, right? How would you say that? It's non-existent because we are always changing, right? That's one way to look at it. And then eventually a time comes, we are gone, we dissolve. Kind of dissolve, this might not be the appropriate word, but we die, and this body, all the chemicals, they go back and merge in the earth. So it's non-existent. So the word illusion, whenever we use illusion, it's in the sense that it is temporary. That's the way to look at that word. And then these rubber bands do not like. And then the sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Yes, so illusion. I was talking about illusion, right? That illusion, whenever the word illusion is used, it means that it is temporary. It's there, but after some time it will not be there. Right? Relationships, hobbies, so on and so forth will not be there forever. Right? Most importantly, the illusion exists because we don't see a connection of things to Krishna. Krishna says this to Lord Brahma in the second chapter, that whatever you see in connection to me is spiritual, whatever you see that's not in connection to me is illusion, it's material. Right? So that's what Krishna is elaborating on here. Yes. Okay, and let's see, Prabhupada is highlighting here that removal of ignorance involves the re-establishment of the eternal relationship between the worshipper and the worshipable, and the consequent understanding of the difference between the part and parcel living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The re-establishment of the relationship. And then when we re-establish that relationship, or when we even put in an effort to re-establish it, then we get this understanding of difference between us as living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Part and parcel. We all are part and parcel of Krishna. Krishna will say this in the 7th chapter. Mamai vamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. Mamai vamsho jiva. Mamai vamsho. Mamai means me. Amsha means part. That all the jivas are my part. And Prabhupada is establishing here. He's bringing that out here. Right? And then let me see if there's anything else. No, okay, I haven't highlighted anything. Okay, coming to the 17th verse. Anything anybody has, any thoughts, any comments, anything you want to bring out before I move forward? Any questions?
Prabhuji, in the translation it says this they have, right? In the previous shlokas translation it says,
yes,
this they have concluded by analyzing the both, by studying the both. So Krishna is referring to who? They?
To both the nature of the material body and nature of the soul. That's what Sankhya Yoga is, analytical study of this creation, and then you come to a conclusion that what is material, what is spiritual, what is my goal, what is my duty in this material.
Okay.
That's
so when they say this they have concluded, it doesn't mean anybody. It doesn't refer to anybody. It just means it has been concluded.
It means to a self-realized soul.
Got it.
They means to self-realized souls. They have concluded this by studying the nature of both. I was mentioning about Kapila Dev. So Kapila Dev, he gives this very clear distinction: what is material, what is this material creation, and he goes on to talk about the 14 planetary systems, the 28 types of hells in this creation. Where do Rakshasas live? Where do Daityas, demons live, and everything. He goes through the entire material creation. And then he talks about the soul. So that could be an example of a self-realized soul who has studied the nature of both material and spiritual. And then he has concluded that material is never going to stay and spiritual is never going to go away. That's what it means, bro.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Kapila Muni, the son of Devahuti, right?
Yes, third canto. If you like to read about him, third canto gives, I think the entire third canto is by him. And he goes into details. And you'll be amazed to see that the start of that is also, not amazed, but probably you'll be happy to see it, that the start of that chapter, of that canto also comes from the submission of Devahuti in front of her son, Kapila Muni, that son, this Andha Tamishram, that this creation is Andha Tamishram. It's like a blind well that I have fallen into and have no way to come out of. So please help me, a sense of surrender. In entire Bhagavatam, I'm sorry, I just keep digressing, but it's nice, something that I want to say that in Bhagavatam, every psychological condition that we go through in this material life living, you can see there in Bhagavatam. That's the beauty of Srimad Bhagavatam. Devahuti clearly accepts, this is a blind well that I have gotten into. I have no way to figure it out, how to get out of it. Please tell me. And then he starts speaking and she realizes and she becomes a self-liberated soul. Very similar to what Arjun is doing. Okay.
Got it, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Okay, so coming to this, anybody else, any thoughts before I move on? No? Okay. 17th. That which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. Okay, so when Arjun asked this question, right? When asked the question, what when Arjun has been asking these questions and he's been putting forth questions that, okay, why should I kill and all that? So what does Krishna do at that time? To answer the question, Krishna changes the frame of reference, right? So for example, Arjun was saying that, oh, I'm a Kshatriya, right? For example, he said, I'm a Kshatriya, and Kshatriya should not kill these, should not try to, or not necessarily Kshatriya, but he was saying that, how can I have compassion in my heart and kill my own teacher and all that, and the Kuru Nandanas and everything. So he was putting himself as a position of a material body, and he was asking questions based on that material body. But what does Krishna do? He completely changes the frame of reference and says that you're not even a body. What are you trying to tell me here? Right? That you are a soul. Why are you even bringing out questions based on the concept of this body? That this person is my uncle, or if these people die, there'll be nobody to take care of women, and unwanted progeny will come. All that nonsense concept that he was bringing forth were all based on a body. But Krishna just changes the frame. You're not a body. Why are you even asking that question? Right? As your body's been passing through, you were a kid once, you're a youth, adult, and one day you'll just go away. Similarly, the soul is passing from one body to another. Right? And all of us have different identities in this material world, right? Brother, sister, mother, father. These identities are not meant to be rejected, but they are functional identities, okay? Based on the kind of function you're performing. So all these are functional identities: mother, sister, brother, friend. Underlying these functional identities, we have a fundamental identity. And what is that? Of a soul. Right? So Krishna is asking Arjun, don't give up your functional identities. I'm not telling you to do that. But what I'm trying to tell you is, try to understand your fundamental identity of being a soul and work according to that. Right? So the functional identity is not supposed to be given up. I mentioned to you earlier. We are not supposed to give up our lifestyle here. Vyavaharika. We have a body, we have to contend with it, we have to live accordingly. The other lifestyle is paramarthika, means that understanding my fundamental identity of a soul and subordinating my that physical, the functional identity to that fundamental identity. That's what Krishna is telling Arjun to do. Right? You're not this body, you're a soul. Again and again, Krishna is saying the same. Right? So we see this in a. I'll give you an example. It's how to understand this concept, right, of functional identity and this fundamental identity. And I'll try to give an example. I'm not sure if it fits there. Let me try it. Once there were 3 friends. Okay, so one of the friends, he pulled out a pack of cigarettes, and he offers to one of the friends. That friend says, "Sorry, I'm trying to quit smoking." Okay. The friend says, "Okay." Then he offers it to the other friend, and the other friend says, "I'm not a smoker." So, what's happening there is that the second person is declining. Both of them are declining to smoke, but the first one has an identity that, oh, I am still a smoker, but I'm trying to quit. But the other one has a concept that, no, I have quit already. I'm not a smoker. Okay, so there is a difference of the identity that each one of them has of themselves. Right. So the second person no longer identifies himself as a smoker, and he's been able to give up that habit. Whereas the first one is still struggling because he has not given up his identity. So on the surface, the functional identity, both of them trying to quit. The fundamental identity is different for both of them. One is still thinking that I am a smoker but trying to quit. The other one has already agreed that I am not a smoker. Right? So Krishna is trying to explain to us that we are not what we normally think. We're not this body. We're not the material bodies. Right? So I mentioned about that experiment that Prabhupada did with these kids in an American school, that he called a kid and as a volunteer and said that, okay, tell me, where is your arm, where is your eye, where is your mouth? And then lastly, Prabhupada asked the kid, where are you? And the kid was baffled. He didn't know what to do. He placed his hand on his chest, but then he didn't know what Prabhupada was asking. So that's the way understanding that I'm not this body. It's my body. It's not I body. Right? My car, it's a car, not my car. So that's the way to understand this concept, right? That understanding that we have a consciousness, and that consciousness is radiating throughout a body, is emanating from the soul, and this body is always changing. And as I've been saying, it's hard to realize all this, but then we can very constantly on a daily basis keep this sense of introspection on 24/7, and eventually it will sink into our subconsciousness and will become a realization. Repetition is the mother of learning. Prabhupada says this. So when we keep repeating something to ourselves, our mind starts to rewire. The brain starts to rewire itself to accept that fact, what we have been saying. Okay, so this is, and there is, I know this is too technical, so I would request you, please, if you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free to come up. I know this is a very technical section, and the Bhagavad Gita is full of such technical sections. And we always have to have this thought of being in a questioning mode, so that we can get to the root of what Krishna is trying to say to us. So please feel free to jump in with a thought or a comment or a question whenever you feel like. So that's the 17th verse. Prabhupada says, anyone can understand what is spread all over the body. It is consciousness. Right? So, and then Prabhupada goes on to say, everyone is conscious of the pains and pleasures of the body in part or as a whole. The spreading of consciousness is limiting within one's own body. So what Prabhupada is explaining here is that another way of understanding that we are a soul is through the medium of consciousness. That there is a consciousness that's spread throughout my body. And then I'm conscious of pains and pleasures to my body. And the consciousness aspect is the thinking, feeling, willing that we go through. And that should itself make us understand that we are a soul, we are not a body. Because somebody is sitting inside this body and is directing it. And whenever I'm looking through, who's the one looking through the eyes? There's a soul. So that's one way of looking at it. And then in this verse, I won't go through the whole purport. Prabhupada goes into details about the soul. For example, he mentions the size of the soul. Right? That the size of the soul is upper part of the hair, which is divided into 100 parts, and this again divided into 100 parts. That is the measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul. So that's Prabhupada is starting to talk about the different. He's giving us a very detailed concept around soul, and the reason he's giving it, why he's talking about, somebody may ask you, why is Prabhupada suddenly delving into such details about the soul? It's so big, so small, and upper portion of the hair and whatnot, so and so forth. The reason is that whenever we want to describe something, because this section is about description of the soul, whenever we start to describe something, we start describing it by the appearance, right? If somebody asks you that, okay, how does the Prime Minister of India look like? The first thing you start talking about will be that person's appearance. He's got a beard, white beard, hair, he wears glasses, he has a specific kind of dressing. So you start with the appearance. That's why Prabhupada is also starting with details about the soul, starting from the fact that how big it is or how small it is, all those details. Right? But it doesn't mean that, somebody can come and ask you this question that, okay, you say that it's 100 into 100, so 100,000, okay, part of a hair. But today we have microscopes that can look into an Armstrong level, nanometer level. So does that mean that I can look at the soul under a microscope? No, because the soul is not material. It's spiritual in nature. You cannot grasp something spiritual using the limited material intelligence that I have, limited material capacities that I have. So this doesn't mean that if it has a size, I can go and just look at it with a microscope. Right? But yes, Prabhupada is telling us that about the concept. So. And then Prabhupada talks about 5 different airs. So what it's saying, and this is another important thing, this atomic soul is floating in 5 kinds of air, right? Which is situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body. These are 3 qualities of the soul, 3 attributes. It's floating in 5 kinds of air. And 5 kinds of air Prabhupada is giving us. And those 5 kinds of airs are distributed across our body. For example, the prana is in the chest area, chest and head. So it governs intake, respiration, forward momentum, those kind of things. Then there is one of them is situated in the navel. There's samana, that is another kind of air, and it talks about absorption of food and assimilation of food. So it's there. So all these have different purposes. But Prabhupada is not necessarily talking about those to go into that yoga, physical yoga aspect. He's telling that this is floating in 5 kinds of air. So consider the soul, and there are 5 vectors coming out of the soul. Okay, so there are 5 kinds of air that is holding the soul there. It's situated within the heart. Now, somebody can ask us, if it's situated within the heart, when somebody gets a heart transplant, does the soul also move away? No. When Prabhupada says heart, he means heart region. It's not situated in the heart. If you see all the paintings that Prabhupada ordered his disciples to make, the soul is shown somewhere in the center, not necessarily towards the heart. Okay, so we have to understand that it doesn't mean that if somebody gets a heart transplant, the soul also moves away. So, and then it spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entity. So it's spread. You can feel that consciousness spreading all over your body. If I think in my mind, I'm going to move my toe, I'm able to move it. Okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to close my eyes. I can do all that. I can control that. That's because of the consciousness being pervasive throughout the body. That's the concept of soul. Anything else? Yes, Ashish.
Prabhuji, is it like, just curious, like when you said it's in the center of the body, is it like any part of the chakras? I've like vaguely heard about some chakras. I don't know about the details, but is soul part of any of the chakras that exist in the body out of the many chakras, or is that a different concept?
It's not a part of any of the chakras too, because chakras, once again, chakra means it's more of a source of energy. Okay. When we say that chakra is at the bottom of your spinal cord, that's the lowest chakra. And then the chakra in the heart is called anhata. That's the anhata chakra. But then the soul doesn't have any relation to it, because the soul is spiritual, it's purely spiritual. But when you're talking about these chakras, it's more of a concept of energy. So the energy which is probably stored in one part of the body, and then you could move it across the spinal cord, can go up to your head. So all that can happen. Even when you take psychedelic drugs, they can also feel that high. That concept of where they are, feeling that. That's why, there are many ways by which you can come into a state of that liberation, as you call it, by taking psychedelic drugs, by doing this physical yoga, or by doing meditation. So there are many different ways to it. But then not all of them is related to the soul, to the spirit soul that I am. Somebody
Got it, Prabhuji. Thank you for clarifying. Yep, that makes sense.
And somebody also had a hand raised. Any more questions? No. Okay. Okay. So yes. So every air has a specific function, right? So the air, the reason Prabhupada is bringing it here, as I mentioned, they all have a specific function, and then there is a mode. So air serves as a mode of interaction between this gross body and the soul, right? So Atma, from that heart region, it radiates outwards. And those 5 airs, as I was saying, they're like those vectors coming out of the soul, and they are pervading this entire body, right? So Prabhupada is also quoting from Mundaka Upanishad. And so the point to understand here is that Atma is all pervasive. And when I say all pervasive, means all pervasive in this body. Whereas Paramatma, Krishna, is pervasive across all bodies. And in the 13th chapter, when we reach there, we will read Kshetragyam Chapi Mahamviti, Kshetra Kshetragyo Bharata. That I am in every single body, Krishna says. You are only in one body, but I am in every. Right? But the main point, again, going back to the same, is that Atma is eternal, body is temporary. So some of these concepts come out properly in this out. And I would again just request you all that please read these purports. They're very, very important. We cannot go through every single line of the purports in the class, in this session. Otherwise, we'll be doing Bhagavad Gita for the next year, many years. And I don't want that to happen. So please read, mark any questions you have, any thoughts that you want to understand why Prabhupada is saying this, what does he mean by this word, so on and so forth. Please do that. We will clear it out in the class. Or if you want to do it offline, you can send me a text and we can discuss. But please read purports. Prabhupada's purports are the essence of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna has said many things, but I might or might not understand them. But when I read Prabhupada's purport, then I am able to understand them. Then that sense, the intuitive sense, accumulates in my mind, right? Then my intelligence becomes the parent in the room when I read Prabhupada's purport. Okay, so moving on to the next one, 18th. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharata. So, this body is bound to end, antavant. But that which is inside the body, that is eternal, indestructible, and immeasurable. Right? And now somebody can ask you, okay, I understand. Now you told me something about the soul, but now why do you suddenly jump into, asking me to fight, right? Suddenly, where did that come from out of the blue, right? So somebody might come and ask you that, and they're reading this verse. So the reason why that's how that is connected is that soul is indestructible, and you will not be able to save the body, and you'll not be able to harm the soul, right? So don't get in a frenzy, thinking that you will be able to save the body of my Abhīṣṭa, my uncle, my teacher, right? So this is just a matter of time. This body is going to go away. So we all are practically born with a death sentence. right? But we don't know when the sentence will be executed. So that's the reason Krishna is connecting it. It's immeasurable, it's indestructible. So go ahead and fight, Arjun. What are you doing? You cannot stop this body from degrading or dying out. So don't try to even act as if you can do it. I highlighted the word aprameyas in there. So the word aprameyas, you will see this across Bhagavad Gita. It comes in many, many places. This word is an important verse. Here, Krishna uses this for soul. Later on, Krishna will use this to talk about himself. Actually, Arjun will say this. In the 11th chapter, Arjun will, while glorifying Krishna, he will call him Aprameya. So, Aprameya means, what does it mean? Immeasurable. What does immeasurable mean? That it can't be measured by my material perception. That's what it means. Okay. In the then somebody can think about it, that how does this Aprameya, this immeasurable aspect, relate to indestructibility, right? So Aprameya is immeasurable and it's indestructible. So Krishna is kind of connecting two concepts here, right? It's directional. It's moving in a direction. So it's an educational verse and it's also directional, right? So these are very important for us sadhakas, right? So because it's immeasurable, right? And the reason it's measurable is because my material conception cannot gather it. Similarly, the indestructibility is also coming from that same root thought, that it's not something that I can construe from my perception. Oh, I can figure it out. Probably I can look at the soul under a microscope. Probably I can make a living being. Scientists have been doing this forever. That we can create a living being, right? So, like for example, I read through these science journals that somebody would come and say, oh, they have created a cell, or they have created an artificial liver, so on and so forth. But all that is started from something that was already living. You didn't make it out of thin air. So the indestructible nature is something that we are trying to understand through our perceptions, but it's not possible. So that's the root of immeasurability and indestructibility is the same. My faulty perception of trying to understand. So that's why they both are connected. Okay. So understanding that the soul is indestructible and the body is destructible, we don't invest too much into the body. But then we don't give it up either. We talked about it. So we do our disinterested obligatory duties. Phrase I learned from the secret. We keep doing our duties, which are my obligatory duties, but don't invest a lot in them. So an important aspect coming out, that soul is different from the body, which is very commonsensical if you go through all these verses systematically. Krishna is explaining, but then as we all know, common sense is very uncommon nowadays. It's a rare commodity. I have voluntarily dulled my ignorance. Oh, sorry, not my ignorance, my intelligence. And I have succumbed to this illusion that this world is presenting to me. It's called cognitive dissonance. What does cognitive dissonance mean? It means that I have a pet at home and I have an animal on my table. I'm eating an animal. If you look at it logically, it doesn't make sense. How can you love one animal and hate another one to an extent that you're ready to eat it up, eat the animal up? It's the cognitive dissonance that is thrust upon us by this world, constantly being bombarded to us by, which just dulls our senses. It dulls my intelligence. That's why it's called cognitive dissonance. And Devamrit Swami Maharaj, he says that we are in a mass consensual trance. So mass means everybody, consensual means that I have agreed to it, and it's a trance. It's a hypnosis that I have voluntarily agreed to before down to. And Prabhupada is sincerely, not sincerely, he's actually done it. He's just throwing that out of the window. I have to accept it. I'm not accepting it. Okay. Prabhupada gives again an example of a sunlight. That sunlight maintains the entire universe, just like this, and similarly the soul maintains. So sunlight is also all pervasive. Similarly, the soul is also all pervasive. Okay, coming to the 19th verse. Neither he who thinks the living entity the slayer, nor he who thinks it slain, is in knowledge, for the self slays not, nor is slain. Okay, it's an important verse here. So, okay, yes, important verse here. Where now this is and we'll talk about this concept. So, Arjuna is thinking that what will people think of me? I'm a killer of my grandfather, my guru. But then Krishna is saying, soul is neither cause of killing, neither the object of killing. You cannot, what is saying? The living entity, the soul, is the slayer. So neither can the soul kill somebody, and neither can the soul be killed. Right? So Krishna is saying that. So I mentioned to you this concept that Krishna can understand what question is there in Arjuna's heart without even Arjuna asking it. It's not been documented in Bhagavad Gita, but senior acharyas have documented it for us. And so we have to understand it that way. That, okay, there's a question by Arjuna, and Krishna is answering it without being asked about it. So soul is neither the killer also, right? So it explains how lamenting for the body is the ignorance. Soul neither kills nor is killed. So what does it mean that the soul is not the killer also? So Arjuna is shooting arrows, isn't he the killer? So the previous verse told us that the body is perishable. So therefore the body's destruction cannot be avoided in its course. So in that sense, when the body is separated from this body, that's unavoidable. It's going to happen. So if somebody thinks that I am the killer, once again, it's kartaham iti manyate thought that I am the doer. I am killing. So here Krishna is talking about the overall pattern of nature, right? Overall pattern of nature. That in this nature, time is devouring everybody. Everybody is dying. Everybody is going through this cycle, birth and death, coming back, going home, coming back. And it's not the soul who is doing it. So don't think that the soul is the cause of anybody's death, right? But then an important concept comes up here. Prabhupada brings that out. Yes. Oh yes, Prabhupada brings this thought out here. Because somebody can ask me, oh, if I'm not the doer, then I can go and kill anybody. This is an obvious, a very stupid question to ask, but then many people have asked me that I've actually answered. So, in answer to that, this is not a license to kill anybody, right? Prabhupada is saying that. It's not, what Prabhupada is highlighting is authority. Without killing without authority is abominable and punishable. If we kill somebody, it means we have certainly stopped the progressive march of that particular soul and abruptly terminated that soul's life of another living entity. But then what is done under a proper authority, it becomes a law. Sorry, not a law. It becomes a duty. And then we are not bound. We are not bound to be paid for that in return as a karma. Okay. Prabhupada gives this example in other places that a soldier, when he kills in the battlefront, he comes home and he gets medals for it. He gets recognition, fame, adoration for that. But if the same soldier in his house or in his street, if he shoots somebody, he will be hanged to death. Why? Because the second concept of killing somebody, where you're just killing somebody randomly, whimsically, that was not under an authority. Whereas killing in the battlefield was under authority. So this verse does not license us to kill anybody. This is more of a concept that Krishna is explaining to Arjuna, that how does the overall nature of this life work, this world works. So don't kill anybody. It's not okay. Coming to verse number 20. For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. We never come into being or go out of being. You know, once somebody, I was distributing books in a festival maybe 6-7 years ago, and somebody asked me this question, and he was just trying to act smart. So he asked me that if the the soul is, is indestructible, why do I see an increase in population? That means the soul is coming into being, right? That is why there's an increase in population, right? And I explained to him how that he has no clue as to what the population of all the species in the world is, right? How much grass is there? COVID, it scared the entire world. And what's COVID? It's a very, very tiny, we can't even see that microorganism. And it's a virus. Microbes, there's so many microbes around. Mosquitoes are there, right? So we don't have a consensus of all the species in the world. And so it could be that many of those species, because it's a cycle, it's an ongoing cycle. I might even have it in my slides somewhere. I had that nice picture I found somewhere. Yes. So there are 6 kinds of transformation happening, right? Birth, growth, sustenance, reproduction, dwindling, and then death. And then we go back, we die. And this again happens. Might not be in a human body, might be in an animal's body, a tree, grass, whatnot. But this cycle, so that's why we see such a change in population, right? We see, human population might be increasing. First of all, population explosion is a myth. It doesn't exist. They're just fooling us around. It's just that because we have created so many boundaries, that there's one place is so highly populated and one place there's land for miles and miles that has not been inhabited. So it's a simple concept, but a different topic. But then we are not also aware of different species, what they are growing into and coming out of. So coming back to the basis of this verse is that we never come into being, we never go out of being. Right? So another example you can think of is that if an alien comes and parks his vehicle in the middle of Sahara Desert and he doesn't see anybody for miles, he will go back and report to his team and back on his planet that, there is no resident in this world. So people have these misconceptions about this world. So I just want to give another example of that. So yes, so it means that the soul did not come into existence at any time. Right? That's what is to be understood. So Krishna is clarifying again the difference between the body and the soul. And as I mentioned earlier, soul is the root of the consciousness, which is spread throughout this body. And this body is the route of consciousness through which the consciousness expresses itself, through which the soul expresses itself. Right? So this idea of angst and anxiety comes in my heart when I don't believe in a soul. Right? So we have to understand, and that gives us a lot of tolerance power when we understand that there is a soul in this body, and we become calm, not that anxious about all that's going on. Right? So yes, here it is. I was meant to bring this slide up. Prabhupada is saying that there are six things that happen in our body. We're born, we exist for some time, we grow, we reproduce, we dwindle, and last we vanish into oblivion. Right? But the soul does not go through these changes. So the essence of this section is again and again the same thing. We're not this body, we are a soul. The soul does not die, the body dies. Nobody can destroy the soul. So, and Prabhupada is elaborating upon it, Krishna is highlighting that. Let's see if there's anything. Okay, the soul is full of knowledge or full always with consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is the symptom of the soul. So, thinking, feeling, willing is the symptom of the soul. Right? And there's another thing here. Okay, might be somewhere else. And then Prabhupada is introducing the concept of soul and super soul now. There are two sitting in our heart, and we'll talk about it in the 13th chapter. That the Paramatma aspect of Krishna comes into this material world with us in whichever body I want to go through. If I want to be a dog in my next life, my super soul goes with me and says, okay, this is what you wanted, live with it. And so it's an observer and a permitter and a supervisor. 13th chapter says, Upadrashta Anumanta cha. that upadrashta anumanta. Anumanta means giving us, it's fulfilling our wishes. Upadrashta, and it's observer. Observer and permitter. That's the exact words. So we will talk about it in more detail. That's why I'm not going into detail here. 13th chapter is full about the concept of soul and super soul. So let's come to 21. O Partha, how can a person who knows that a soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn and immutable, kill anyone or cause anyone to be killed? Yeah. So soul is eternal, right? That is so the verse 2 to 13 that introduced us as the soul as a distinct being. So now talking after that aspect, okay. Talked about soul as being indestructible. What next? Right. This is the purport is important here. Everything has its utility. Prabhupada is going to talk that. Right. For example, the word sannyas means that one who knows perfectly the utility of everything. Right. Of everything complete. Sun, the word sun, the root word sun, you might have heard it in some kirtan. So the complete, the word sun means complete. Anyas means that who knows the perfect utility of everything. So sannyasi is one who knows the perfect utility of everything. So being a sannyasi is a very heavy job and it's a high state of realization. Right? And so Prabhupada starts by explaining that everything has its proper utility. Violence also has its utility, and how to apply this violence rests with the person in knowledge. So, and then let me see if Prabhupada goes and explains this. Okay, so let's just talk a bit about this, right? So, everything has a utility. So Prabhupada is talking about it. Prabhupada is specifically highlighting the aspect of violence here. So, when Prabhupada later on in the purport, he's talking about here that if somebody, a murderer, should be condemned to death in the next life, or so that in his next life he'll not have to suffer for the great sin he has committed. So the reason this concept of hanging somebody to death for a sin is so that if we do a sin and if we prolong the admittance and repentance, then the reaction is also going to be compounded. So longer the period we wait, the more we have to pay. That is why when somebody is caught and they're hanged, we are not letting that period extend. So his or her reaction is not compounded. Right? So Prabhupada is talking about violence being utilized properly, and then he's also talking about admittance or repentance or punishment for a sin that we have done. So that's that aspect Prabhupada is bringing about, right? So nobody can kill the soul, right? Nobody can kill the soul, but then Prabhupada is explaining that still we see this concept of hanging somebody to death. The purpose here is that Krishna is stressing upon Arjuna again that you should kill these people because of the sins they have done, and if you don't stop that prolongment of their sins at this moment, their suffering in their next life would be equally more intense. So please kill them. That's the reason Krishna is bringing out this verse, and Prabhupada is elaborating upon the concept of being hanged to death. And then he is also asking that violence is not wrong. As long as we know how to use violence, it's not wrong. Right? Some of you might know, in Mayapur, in 1984, many dacoits, they attacked the temple there. And that time in 84, we're talking about 30, 40 years ago. It was a not that densely populated as Mayapur is now. And they attacked them in the middle of the night. And as you know, everybody knows that DTs, they're costly, looking at it from a material perspective. And they have these jewels on them. So some of the dacoits came to loot that. But then Prabhupada's disciples just didn't sit around and say, oh, let's chant Hare Krishna mantra, and these dacoits might go away. No, they fought with them. Bhakti Raghav Swami Maharaj, he lost one of his legs in that incident. I don't know if you know him. He doesn't have one leg because one of the dacoits threw a bomb at him and he just tore apart his leg. So Ahimsa is not something meant for us to, it's not like chicken away from the situation. One of the politicians in India who had popularized the concept of ahimsa, somebody asked him was that, what are you going to do if your daughter is being molested in front of you? Are you not going to be violent and kill the perpetrator, or at least fight against the perpetrator? And that politician, he thought for a minute and said, no, I won't commit any violence. So the other person who was asking the question, that very second, he replied back, then you are doing violence towards your daughter because you're not helping her out, even though you have the capacity to help her. There are people harassing her and you're not helping her out. That means you're doing violence against her. So it's a very subtle concept. Once again, that's why we need Prabhupada. Without Prabhupada, we can't understand all. So violence can be adopted if other methods have failed. Right? Bhagavad Gita doesn't talk of pacifism all the time. No. There are at least 3 incidents in Bhagavad Gita that I can right now remember where Krishna says, Tasmad Yuddhasva Bharata. Go ahead and fight, Arjun. Go ahead and fight. So it's never a naive pacifism that Krishna is propagating here. The war is not ruled out. That's why they're fighting here. So violence has a utility, but it should not be used whimsically. Okay, so let's come on to. I'll take a pause here. Anything on your mind that you want to bring out? Any thoughts? And you can also tell me if this becomes too heavy sometimes. You can just keep on going, might get too technical and something that is hard to understand or kind of boring. So you just let me know that also.
Prabhu, this is nice that the points that you're pointing out in text 21, that they will suffer more in next lifetime. So that's for a reason for Arjuna to fight. So yeah. Is it possible? Is your PDF saved on the drive also, Prabhu? I mean, I'm not highlighting in my book, but this is nice to review.
Yeah. It's not saved on the drive. I can save it. Yeah, I can save it. Or probably what I can do is, every time we finish a chapter, I can upload one version, and then because I'm not sure opening up in the drive, how will I work on it? Or I can figure it out. But yes, I can put in the drive for you. That's a good idea.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so let's go on to 22. We are at 8:22, so let's go on to 22nd verse. This is a very important verse, right? You must have heard this so often. Vasham Shijernani Yatha Vihaya Navani Ghrnati Naro Aparani Tatha Sharirani Vihaya Jirnani Anyani Samyati Navani Devi. It's a nice verse to chant. As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless one. I remember hearing this verse when the Mahabharata TV series came, probably 80s, 90s, when was that? And I still remember, Krishna, the person who played Krishna, he recited this verse, and it kind of his voice echoed, and they made it the sound that nice. I still remember him reciting this verse. So yes, and it's a very important verse of Bhagavad Gita. You all know, right? That when we change from old clothes to new, we feel happy, right? I remember when I was young, growing up, I would get a new pair of dress on Diwali or some of these other festivals or my birthday, and that would really make me very happy. Nowadays, everything is so fast. There's instant gratification. You have to just click a couple of buttons and you have a dress on your doorstep next morning. I don't even realize how does Amazon does that, but probably they have figured it out. So the instant gratification also plays a role in dulling my senses. So yes, so whenever we change clothes, we feel happy. We are naturally inclined to give up old clothes and take up new. So similarly, when nature awards us a new body, once my old body is tattered, my organs are giving up, my heart is skipping a beat here and there, my kidneys are not filtering everything properly, my stomach is not digesting, then I get a new body. So what's there to lament, right? In general, we all like to have a youthful body, right? No one likes an old invalid body. So impetus to avoid old age to avoid disease is inbuilt in our system. It's in our system. And the reason is because I'm a soul. This concept of a body that dies off doesn't fit into my conception because I am eternal. I'm never going to change. But then because of this cognitive dissonance that I just mentioned to you, this ignorance that has been dumped on me by this material world, makes me worried, makes me anxious, thinking that I'm this body, but I'm not. So this impetus to avoid old age and disease is inbuilt because I'm an eternal soul, right? It is unnatural for me to die. It's actually below my dignity to be in this body, if you look at it in one sense, because this body is so gross. We don't have to go into the details. Everybody knows how gross this body is, right? So that goes on to show that we are deathless, we are diseaseless, we are ever youthful, right? And because change, disease, death, old age, because this is unnatural, I am always trying to resist it. That is why I'm always trying to fix my body. I'm trying to patch up, right? My teeth start falling. I go and get a teeth there. I start having wrinkles on my face. I get Botox injections. There are so many things that people do, right? So it's a, as a soul, it's a violence against me to be subjected to this body, right? And Krishna is teaching us how we can liberate from this material body. How can we liberate ourselves as soul from this body? And the process of transmigration is being described here in this verse, right? So transmigration is focusing on the journey of soul from one body to another. It keeps going. Right? So, there's another word, right? You might have heard of the word reincarnation. So reincarnation and transmigration are two different words. This particular verse talks about transmigration. What is transmigration is that I'm moving from one body to another, but it's not necessary that the next body is going to be of a human being. It can be of a dog, a cat, a tree, whatever. But reincarnation is more of human to human birth. And there are so many documented cases of reincarnation now. In the Baltimore Rath Yatra recently, I had an hour-long discussion with this Muslim lady who was she was very open, she was very receptive, but her mosque people had told her that this concept of reincarnation is dead. And she was just like, how do I understand that? And I gave her a name of a professor at the University of Virginia who does a lot of research in that. And he has thousands of documented cases of reincarnation. But then coming back, this verse is talking about transmigration. Just wanted to highlight that here. What are we? Where are we at? 22. Okay, I'll stop here. We are at 8:28. I wanted to finish this section today. It's up to verse 30. But yes, please, questions, please. Two persons have raised their hands. Please go ahead. Please ask if Gopal Prabhu or Radhika, anyone, please go ahead.
Prabhu, he's in the other room and he's having trouble speaking, so he put a question.
Oh yes, so I see that. Okay, how does the cycle of birth and death apply to a spiritual body, or a pure devotee eventually taking a spiritual body? How does the cycle of birth and death apply to a spiritual body, or a pure devotee eventually taking a spiritual body? So when you say a pure devotee taking a spiritual body, well, in this material world, the body will degrade. But if you're talking about a spiritual body, that happens when we move to the spiritual world. But then a pure devotee, even in this material world, can sever every single connection to this material body and can become transcendental in this very material body. Then it becomes a sadhaka deha, as it's called. Sadhaka means a devotee, a deha means body. So it becomes a devotee's body. It's no more a material body. But then, and the reason is that because the devotee has severed connections to this body. But in a material sense, this body will go away. And when the devotee is purified, when he goes to the spiritual world, he or she will get a spiritual body. So as Krishna has told us, this material body, there is no endurance. It is going to die. Whether it's a pure devotee or a materialist person, this body goes away. But for a pure devotee, leaving this body is very much like, I heard a senior devotee say this, a very funny thing, as if you've dropped your chadar, right? You know, these, as devotees, we have a chadar, we keep a chadar, or like a shawl you keep when it's cold. And you can drop it somewhere and you might not even realize it. So that's the thought process of a pure devotee. When the pure devotee leaves his or her body, that's the way it behaves. But for a materialist like me, when I will be leaving my body, it will be extremely painful for me because I have so many false connections to this body. So there's a difference between how the person leaves his body. But then on a material level, this body is going to die off. Hopefully, Gopal Prabhu, that was helpful for you.
Yes, Prabhu, it definitely was helpful. So Prabhu, one more question. You discussed earlier that the living entities or the souls in this material world, can be in any form, grass, an insect, human body. Do we know what the percentage of souls in the material world compared to the spiritual world is?
Not a percentage, but Prabhu, Srimad Bhagavatam tells us that the spiritual world is 3/4 of the creation and this material world is 1/4 of the creation. So if we go by that concept, then the material world for sure has much higher number of souls in their spiritual world than in this material world. But this material world will never be empty of souls. It's not as if that one day will come and everybody will go back home, back to Godhead, and this material world will not be needed. It's not never going to happen. So this soul, like a prison, prisoners will keep coming in, some will keep going away. So I haven't seen anywhere in scripture if there's a number or even a faint reference to a number of souls in this versus spiritual world. I haven't come across that.
Thank you, Prabhu. Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Any other questions? Yes, Radhika, your question, please. You're on mute if you're speaking. No? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. We're at 8:32. So we'll meet next week. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, Hare
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.